I'm going to record. So we're going to start our talk on Waldorf education. And then I will, at the end, so I just really want to show you the full sort of picture, and then we'll talk about what we've done for COVID, okay? So we're going to go and look at some pictures here. Let me just pull this up, because I believe pictures are worth 1,000 words. Laura, is that okay? Screen? Yeah. We good. Okay. So I love this quote. It's actually on the front of our building. And I would say that if I had to put Waldorf education in a nutshell, it would kind of be off of this quote. There's many beautiful quotes about education and Waldorf, but this is so beautiful that really what we are committed to and what we are doing is honoring that there's already the fuel inside this child. There is already everything they need, and it is up to us to ignite that we are really living with this word education as its true meaning of drawing out what is within the human being and that particular human being and bringing that to fire. And I have a wonderful story about this because my son went through the school, and of course, because I was a teacher, was always kind of like, you know, whatever. And it wasn't till he left and he went to high school. He had a great time in his freshman year, but come sophomore year, he came to me one night and he goes, "Remember that quote on the building of the school, Mom?" He goes, "Man, they're filling pails right now at our school," in the high school. And he goes, "Why can't they just like help us light our fire?" So it meant something to him later. What I wanted to do before we sort of dive in is have us kind of reflect for a moment for ourselves. I have like 4 questions. If you have a pencil, I think it'd be great to, you know, spend a little time just journaling for yourself or just remembering for yourself, because a lot of times we can't really work with our children until we understand what happened for ourselves. So the first question is, what were the messages that you got from your education? What were some of those core messages? What teacher inspired you? I know there was always one. There had to be one. And so what was it about that teacher that inspired you? What were your gifts as a child? What can you really reflect back and go, gosh, I was just naturally this way? And were those gifts seen? And if they were, try to really imagine who was that person that saw you. And so that, because you can become one of these people also for children. So what was that about them, and how did you feel seen? And if you weren't seen, how was that? You know, how was it to be around adults that didn't see you? And lastly, if you can list, like, and we're not going to do this right now, I think this is just something to take into your own, you know, contemplative life, but what were those core beliefs that you formed due to your education? I'm not talking about parents so much, but it might be a little mushed in, but just some of those core beliefs that were formed from your education. For some people, they were positive, and you might find both, but just to sort of untangle that for yourself. Because what our work is as Waldorf educators is to really be a person that sees the gifts of the child, to help ignite them and unfold them, and to inspire them, which means to breathe life into that person. And it is different for every child. So I'm going to read a little quote and then we'll dive in. "The genius that we're born with wants activity. It's connected to a spark, and it wants to burn. It wants to make. It wants to learn. It wants to create. And it has gifts to give, because that is the nature of genius." All right. So, what is Waldorf? Where did it come from? Some of you may know, but I'll just give a quick sort of overview. So, um, first of all, there's about 1,000 Waldorf schools in 60 countries. It's actually one of the fastest growing education models in North America. There's about 159 schools in North America, 50 of those being charter schools. And there's about 2,000 early childhood programs. It's been around a while. So Rudolf Steiner opened the first school, Waldorf school, in about 1919. We just celebrated last year our 100-year anniversary. And he was not firstly, he wasn't first an educator. He was a man of many things. He was an author. He was a philosopher. He was a scientist. He was an artist. He was an architect. And he also gave indications on healthy farming and medicine. And so what was it about him? Steiner was really a visionary. He looked deep into the nature of sort of being, is the way you could put it. And so people would come to him and ask him, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And he would look deeply into what he felt were truths about that certain topic. For farming, for instance, that it wasn't just looking at the soil or just looking at that, but the whole picture, how the animals engage with the land, how the seasons, what you plant when. And so he was quite a brilliant man. He wrote many, many, many books. He was interested in what he called the threefold social order. And so he was giving many talks on this, and it was really about how to bring health, how to become healthy adults that brought health to the economic part of our lives, to the legal and governing systems, and then to cultural and human rights. And so we have to remember this was also during the war. The war was happening, and there was obviously, with what was happening with Hitler and everything, a picture of how do we actually create, how do we bring an education that would actually allow for free thinkers to move forward, instead they were watching this brainwashing that was going on. So in the town of Waldorf, there was a man named Emil Molt. He was the owner of a cigarette factory, Waldorf cigarette factory. And he came to him and he said, well, what would you do if we wanted to open a school for our children in this town that would help educate the whole child to become independent thinkers? And apparently he went away and came back after a bit, and he gave these indications on an education that would be based on his philosophy. Is called anthroposophy. It's kind of a big topic, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but the foundation of it is that there's wisdom in the human being, and he has many lectures about this, but what he came back to was, to the teachers, was we have to look and understand so deeply how the human being unfolds. How does a human being develop? Not just here, not just there, but just all of us. What are those core things? And so those first teachers that were trained were actually not people who had been just teachers by profession. He really looked for people who had a certain quality, an ability to look really deeply and to understand things. So I love this quote. He said, "You will not be a good teacher if you focus only on what you do and not on who you are." So that's also very foundational to our work, that we as teachers are always working on ourselves so that we can stand before these children and not tell them things, but just be a certain way for them. So he, just sort of so you can have an overview, he said the most important thing that we can do when we're looking to educate children is to understand where they are in their development, and then understand how do we awaken capacities in them depending on where they are in their development. This to me is so profound, and I just, because for me it made all the difference in what I had been trained to do was to actually do things. Now that I understand even neurologically how children unfold and their physical development, I understand that what I was being asked to do in the public system at that time, and again, there's, you know, lots of creativity coming in now, but at that time, as I was basically asking children to do things that they were not neurologically, emotionally, spiritually, physically ready to do. So I was maybe not harming them, but maybe they weren't feeling too good about themselves. I know that. So the way we look at where children are and how to educate them is looking at childhood as sort of having three distinct parts to it. There's the birth to 7 part. There's the time of 7 to 14, which is where we have them when they're here in the elementary school, and then the time of 14 to 21. And really now we, you know, as we look at how the brain develops, and we can say that possibly childhood's not actually really over till about 20, I would say with my own son, about 24, that I'm starting, we're getting over into a different part of development right now with him. So he said, if you look at the child from birth to 7, they're developing their physical capacities. When you really think about a baby that gets off that floor, you know, from the belly to then what they can do at age 7, it's phenomenal, right? What happens in their physical development. So important to give that time. And he said, if we're going to go, and I will vouch for that because I'm a special, I don't even call myself special ed. I'm a teacher of very gifted children that sometimes have a need to redo some of the things that didn't happen there. Integrate reflexes or develop foundational sensory systems that just need a little more time. So I have a very big interest in this time being protected. And for those of you who still have your children in Waldorf situations or not, it doesn't matter, but just to know that if all they do is move and play, we're in good shape, because there is so much that happens in that time through the creative play, through doing all those delicious variations of movements. We're really, really solidifying that foundational systems that allow for higher learning to happen more easily later on. I always think of it as like building a house. For those of you who have done your contractors, how much harder is it to go back later and in an older house and put a foundation in, right? Way easier to build from the ground up and just create the foundation, put them on step by step. So Steiner tells us that as teachers or parents, that the time during this time, the way we want to educate or work with the child is through that, just allowing for that time, and that they're working through imitation and imitating the adults around them and understanding. I mean, you know, walking really is something that they're imitating, you know, learning how to do speech, all of that, and really giving that time its time. When they get to the us, around 6 to 7 years old in the first grade, there you can feel the shift in them. The creative play becomes more deliberate. They're ready. You can feel this readiness, this rightness. They come in. And even neurologically now, they're beginning to really myelinate into the limbic part of the brain. So it's not that young children don't have like emotional life. We know that but it's more, if you really watch it, it's more body-based, right? They get mad, they boo, you know, they get sad, they cry, they this, they that. You can begin to see around the age of 7, something really shift there. The emotional life becomes a little more complex, and it's just more in the forefront. Some of the physical, although they play, but you can see as we get into the 7 to 9 that, you know, that the inner life becomes as active as the outer life. So his indications were that it's essential to educate the child in this time through you're basically educating the emotional body. It's actually called the EQ. We all worry so much about that IQ, but there's a whole nother body that has an EQ. And that's this emotional awareness, emotional intelligence. And I will go out on a limb, and it's not too hard to see what's happening. But if we don't educate that, we're seeing a lot of adult behavior that doesn't have an education in that area. They, people who don't know how to, take their thinking and meld it with their inner life and their emotional life. So he says during this time, it's essential that we educate through the imagination, through the arts, through the story. That's the language of the emotional body. And look at any child. You can see right away how, if you sit them down with a worksheet in first grade of a bunch of division problems, I had that in first grade. I remember at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we had math in Catholic school, and there was all these division problems. And I remember as a 7-year-old just going, what? So instead you can bring all of that curriculum, but how do you bring it? How do you bring it first through the heart and then out? We're going to talk about that a little more. And then at 14 to 21, you see this next capacity waking up, and that's that intellectual, more abstract thinking. It's not that it doesn't happen in these years, especially towards the end, but you still always are keeping it through that, bringing things through their emotional life. Here, there's more of that capacity for independent thinking, and you want to educate them through that debate and creative endeavors and whatnot. So that's an overview of what he brought. And just quickly, because I do have many trainings also on what goes on in the brain, but it's fascinating that we have these 3 different distinct parts of our brain also. And this reptilian, more, primitive brain that develops is really active it's all active all the time, but it's the part that's developing and most active between birth and 7. We've shared that in our evolution for 500 million years. We've had that in common with, creatures here and that part of our brain. So it's the old part of our brain, and it's the first that's the most awake in the developing human being. This limbic part of the brain, this part where our emotions, the seat of the emotional brain, we have had in common with the more mammals, and that for about 250 million years. It was this was here and this one got built on or evolved in. And the neocortex, which is neo means new, the new brain. We've only really shared with, in our development for 2 million years. So you go from 500 mils, 250 million, it's a new brain. And it's the part of the brain that we put so much emphasis on when we're just thinking about education, but it's actually not the part of the brain that, we know a lot about these. There's a lot that can come through there. So Steiner also talks about how we kind of, as we develop, we recapitulate evolution. So it makes sense then to develop each of these parts of our neurology, which is what we work with in Waldorf education. So I'm going to go through now quickly and just talk about some things that I think are unique to Waldorf education. We all kind of know what, school looks like, but what is, the core components and what's unique. And I would say at the heart of it is the relationship with the teacher and the student. We take that very seriously. So we are not putting children up, well, we'll talk about how we deal with COVID, but we're not putting them up with computers or something to be learning. They're learning through relationship. And what's different than going to other schools is the teacher stays with that child for a chunk of time. Now, in the original schools, in many Waldorf schools, the teacher stays with the child from 1st to 8th grade. And that's quite a journey. I have done it. A beautiful journey where you start with them in 1st grade, you graduate them in 8th. At the Siskiyou school, we've decided that the 2-teacher model, having a child having 2 teachers in their career, and that's for many reasons. Just having that 2 sets of eyes, and it's also realistically, in these times, for a teacher to stay with the class for that long isn't as, simple as it used to be. And so anyways, we have developed a 2-teacher model. So that child will have 2 teachers. They have many, 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 many other teachers, but as their core teacher. So in this relationship, some of the things that stand out for me that are so valuable, first of all, it's an amazing thing to meet this child in 1st grade and to build this relationship and to watch them shift and turn and, even bump up against and do the rebellion or whatever they need to do, but the trust that is there. And I throw it out to us, like, where do you do your deepest work? Is it in these little flitty relationships, or is it in your long-term relationships? Really, we do our deepest work, both for the teacher and the child, because if there is a struggle or there's something to work through, you're not going to just put it to the side. You know that you're going to be with this child again next year. And, and it's not just like, oh, I'm going to only have this child for 8-9 months and off they go. You're really working through with them. Also, what's so beautiful about it is when you come back in September after a summer, it's like no time has gone by and you just pick it right up. I actually remember as a child in September, I don't know how many of you remember, but there was a lot of testing that went on because the teacher had to figure out where we were. There's none of that because you know where these children are. You pick them right back up. It's like you haven't missed a beat. So that's really a beautiful thing. In Waldorf education, one of our mottos, we have many, but one is that the children are the curriculum. The child is the curriculum. So you go in, we're trained, we have a lot to offer, but you're always looking to that child or that class. I've done this so many times. I took 2 classes through 5th grade. I took 1 1st through 8th. And then I still have my program over here that I've done for many, many years. I never do it the same. I never do it the same, even though it's sometimes the same, materials and everything. But when the children come, it's like, oh, they need it. They need this, or they need this. And you are following that. So it's a very living education. We look to them. And then just a snippet also, that relationship between the teacher and the child is knowing that no 2 children are alike. And I actually can turn to that child. We talk about temperament in Waldorf education, that there's, and I'll maybe give a talk one night about that, but there's different flavors of how children sort of incarnate into their body. So we know those fiery children, and then the quieter, and there's other in between different temperaments. But you literally are looking to that child to meet them in their way and be the medicine, and then turn in the next minute, turn to another child and have a very different energy with them. And I love this picture of the handshake, because even in that handshake, which we do every single morning, even during COVID, it's not the handshake, but it's a bow, but it's this making eye contact, really seeing that child. And part of our practice is that they are not the same child they were yesterday. This is a brand new day. And there's something powerful in the eye contact to greet them, but you're doing it energetically different with each child, depending on who they are. So, and then the main lesson. This is a picture of a probably 2nd grade, I think it was, maybe 1st grade. And the main lesson happens every day, grades 1 to 8. It is sort of the nugget of the day, and I'll talk later about the other classes, but every day for this 2-hour chunk of time, the children have a main lesson with their class teacher. And there's different components to the main lesson. Steiner said in every main lesson, you want to educate you want to educate the body, the heart, and the mind. So in the way that children, so, we're not just talking about mind, but this mind. So the head, the heart, and the hands. So there's different parts of the main lesson. They'll come in, there's usually movement, some rhythmic work, which involves music and speech work and poetry. And it's really this enlivening quality. It's also works to bring the children together. And then the heart of the lesson is, again, we do it a little differently, maybe timing wise, depending on how old the children are, but then the heart of the lesson is given. So say, like they're doing the Oregon Trail, 4th grade. So then she would dive in, and it's not standing up there going, back in 2019, these people came across, no, it's through the story. The teacher delivers a story. And it's an amazing experience to be in a classroom with a group of children when a story that meets their inner development, when you talk to 4th graders about all the folks that came over on the Oregon Trail, it's just the perfect time because they're also in the midst of like traveling through childhood. They're coming into a new part of childhood that's challenging. And so they get to talk about, they get to hear about these people who had these challenges. Or in 1st grade, a fairy tale, which is really more of that dreamy consciousness. And they get to hear a story that meets them and their inner world. Very different when you hit an 8th grade. They're talking American history or whatever it is, but it's not just Martin Luther King, blah, 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 but there was this man and he grew up and it's a story and it's an oral story. That the teacher tells, and out of that, even if it's math or science or whatever, out of that story or that imaginative lesson, then comes what is the concept you're bringing to the child. So it's a 2-hour chunk of time. It actually, a lot of people are like, wow, 2 hours, but it goes by, especially when it's well designed, it goes by really quickly because it just has this flow of this movement, music into the story, into the work, into the children writing or bringing out whatever they've learned from that. We teach in blocks so that's another what's unique about this main lesson. So for a 3 to 4 week chunk of time, the children are immersed in one subject. And it's a beautiful thing because I come from a different background in public school where you're, 40 minutes this, 40 minutes that, 40 minutes that. And to have them be able to live that deeply into something, we actually find they retain so much more, but it becomes really in them. And then it's wonderful because then the music teacher's picking up on I know when they were doing, she was working with Gregorian chant the other day with them because the 6th grade, because they were studying medieval history or whatever, that those themes can be picked up by the specialty teachers. So it becomes one package for the children. I wanted to just share a few. These were from today, actually. I just kind of cruised around the classroom. So the teachers also working artistically. They're studying some Chinese culture, and here's from the Oregon Trail, just that this is what a child walks into on the blackboard. Lovely. And then after the lesson or in the lesson, the children bring out what is happening, and these are just beautiful examples of their main lesson book. So instead of having a textbook like with this physiology of just looking at the picture of the ear, this child has drawn the ear. It's a pretty phenomenal thing. Here's 1st grade. And this is like a math lesson. You can see the times table and the divide and plus, and that was a whole story for the child. And now they've probably gone around the room and they've acted out these little gnomes and they're different things that they do. And this is the child now bringing it to the book. And that really distills it for them. These books are quite beautiful. So, and here's a botany lesson up here. I have some I'll show you that are like, this is a 2nd grade. They were having something about a fable or whatever. And again, every single grade is meant to, the stories that are being told are also about their emotional development. So in second grade, they get a little bit of that rascal thing going on. And I'm not sure, you know, they can be really good, but they also have this little rascal thing going on. So it's so wonderful to bring them fables because it just sort of speaks to where they are. And then seventh grade, this is what some of these children can do. All of them create a main lesson book. I will say that I don't believe that by nature my son was an artist. He became an artist, though. This capacity was really brought out in him. And you know, this is a essay that's been written after they've heard about Leonardo da Vinci's life, and then they've copied one of the, you know, his pieces. And then on top of it, they're putting it in the book in calligraphy because they've learned calligraphy as well. So it's quite phenomenal. And then learning about the digestive system or whatever physiology block they were in, all done through the arts, you know, and it's beautifully written out, but this is their own taking it in and digesting it, I guess, and putting it back out. So in addition, we work very diligently in Waldorf education to bring experience to the children. So this is an example of a fifth grade event. It's called the Olympiad. They were studying Greek mythology. And this is at a beautiful time when you're in fifth grade where their bodies come into this kind of harmony as they've finished that first part of childhood and haven't quite hit that pre-adolescent time. And we give them Greece, you know, about that beauty and that moment of the breath. They study the arts, but they also practice with our games teacher for this Olympiad, and they learn these different events. So it becomes also an initiation because they've trained for this, you know, how to throw the javelin, how to throw the discus. It's all done very reverently. And then they go and they meet with other Waldorf schools and we redo this event for them. And, you know, it's scary. They sleep away for the first time. They sleep in different cabins with different children from different schools. They're put in city states. And then they do this event, and it's not competitive. It's really just bringing your whole self to it. But it's an initiation as well, so that, you know, this whole thing about not everything happens just in the classroom. These are some examples too of as they, you know, get into these older grades, that we give them an opportunity then to teach what they've learned. So these are projects they've done, and they get pretty used to talking in front of the class, and then later in front of the whole school when they're older. So just bringing that piece that you cannot, you know, I know these kids got so much. I remember when they did these projects and they learned so much, but for them to then teach it and to help others experience it. So I picked this out because you can see the Chinese teacher, but see, here's now like a schedule. So that main lesson will always happen. And I'm talking about, we've had to do things different during COVID, but this is sort of the way it goes. They have that main lesson, then they'll have maybe an academic class. And then these are our specialty classes. We have music that they get, woodwork. Handwork is that knitting. They start with knitting in first grade. They learn how to cross stitch later. My son made socks. He made a fortune for his 8th grade trip making hats that he can now do in half an hour, and sold them up on the mountain. Gosh, they do so many things in handwork. They crochet, they learn how to do all of that, and they take great pride in it. It's beautiful. Painting, we have 2 languages they are exposed to, Chinese and Spanish. We've also added, I taught Latin, I know, for 4 years, and this year it's back. And then we have a games teacher, which I guess you would call PE. It depends on the development, again, of the children, on what kind of activity they get. We have a very strong drama program. I'm assuming that's because we live in Ashland and we have OSF, but we also have Eve Smythe from the children's, Ashland Children's Theater, who is brilliant, and she works with our children. And then Acorn is our version of science for the younger grades, really observation of nature, which then come 5th grade turns into the sciences, and then all the way up, science officially into the upper grades. Now, what you're not seeing here is we like to keep the younger children with their class teacher for most of their academics, but come 5th grade and then up, then those children have, you know, a language arts teacher. We have very, very, very wonderful middle school math teachers who prepare them very well. And so they'll have these more academic specialty teachers as well. So they're seeing quite a few teachers through the week. They're not just seeing their main lesson teacher, but that person's their shepherd, you know, just really with them, watching over. Like I said, our drama department is quite strong. You can see this is up through the grades, finishing with an 8th grade play here. And then we're very proud. We developed this as we opened the new school. We really saw this, well, first of all, we live in an amazing place, but the level of learning that happens when children are taken out a lot. So we, you know, again, we're in COVID right now, so so sad that we haven't been able to do some of this, but here, like I backpacked my 27th graders 36 miles through the Trinities, and that was really, I mean, for many of them, that was life-changing. Only 2 of them had ever been backpacking, which was amazing for me. We had so many social things come up, so many, like, you know, really having to stretch, and these, you know, it was powerful, powerful learning there, and they loved it at the end. They were afraid in the beginning, but they loved it at the end. So, you know, and here we're studying geology, so we take them to Lassen and let them really see what happens when, you know, what a volcanic activity looks like. Or so. And then I would say, if I have, you know, so many things about Waldorf education, but the fact that we grew, so you see these children, this is 1st grade and this is 8th grade, we have this chunk of time that these children grow in community. They're held not only by their teachers, but by their class parents, and then the school as a whole. We have festivals that we celebrate together. Laura does an amazing job with bringing us together when we can be together. And it's just an amazing thing to, you know, the 8 years kind of actually goes by pretty quickly, but they coming out the other side. That what many, many people say when they meet graduates of Waldorf, it's like they can tell because there's just something, so it's like they know who they are as much as they can at that age, but there's sort of a groundedness of, and being able to actually speak to others. And so the question often comes up, I actually have a piece here I want to read, but the question often comes up of how do they do when they leave. We are actually in the process of really gathering stats on our graduates, but 3 years ago at both St. Mary's and the high school, our kids were valedictorians. They often are very active in, you know, being president of the high school, all of that. What the high school tells us all the time is that your kids, it's not only do they do well academically, but they love to learn. Like, they're the ones who come into the high school and they innovate. They'll like start new things. And so, you know, they've given us incredible feedback, just that actually they're, you know, not worried about them academically. And also they bring such juice. But I pulled this out because this is some of the top skills that they're saying now are necessary in the American Job Exchange, which is a corporation or whatever that looks out for, you know, what kids need now. And as you can see from the list here, it's the bottom is the written and verbal skills, but so many of these things that we work so profoundly with in Waldorf education are right at the top of their list. these things like social skills and problem solving, creativity and flexibility. And of course, and as Siskiyou School in particular, we actually have really strong standards for being able to express yourself both orally and in writing. So, but just a little snippet here. We had, gosh, Laura, what was it? Maybe 2 years ago, we did a history vision night, and we had a alumni come back. His name is Hudson Wallbank. He's 25 years old, and he started a company actually when he was 16. He left high school and started a company of photographing. What did he say? Here it is. Photographing fancy cars down in LA. But anyways, he's running now a business at age 24 with 22 employees, made like $1 million in his last year. But he came back to talk and speak to like how his Waldorf education, what mattered and how it helped him become so successful. And what he said was so amazing. One was that by staying with that same group of children for those 8 years, he learned that the grass is not greener, that things are not someone else's problem. He always asks himself, how do I affect the situation? Because over time, as you're working, you know, through so many things, he said it was about staying with that group and having to work through those things that he realized he always played a part. And we love hearing this because really the fruits of EQ are being able to understand yourself so deeply and how you affect other. And I just thought that was beautiful. He said he doesn't hire people on their resume, he hires them for who they are. So, which I thought was so funny because that's kind of how Steiner did it with the teachers originally. But he takes them out for dinner and he looks them in the eyes and he's like, tell me your story. And then lastly, something he said was, he said the arts, like part of that of the Waldorf education was so huge. And he said, I have come to understand the arts, not just a kind of run-of-the-mill thing you should do because it's fun for kids, but it's actually affects how you see the world. And he said, I see the world now through art, an artist's eye. And he said, it has profoundly affected who I am and my business that I run. So I love that. Some of the other, just a few things that are unique about our school that we, as we built it, we added in. One is this buddy system. It sounds really silly, but it's profound. When the first graders come into our school, they're given a 6th grade buddy. And that buddy is their person that watches out for them. The 6th graders just finished making, 2 weeks ago, fairy houses, like these beautiful elaborate fairy houses in woodworking class for each of their buddies, and to see these little ones light up. The reason I love it is because 6th grade is right when you're beginning to like go, who am I? And that awkward stage, and these kids become heroes to these 1st graders. And when I think about like in a middle school situation where you have 1,000, you know, 6th, 7th, and 8th year old graders all like, who am I, and feeling so awkward and all trying to be, you know, all put aside. Instead, they are just coming into that, and then they become the big ones, and they become the ones who the little ones look up to, and it's really incredible medicine. So we love that. The other way we really support is we have assistants in our grades 1 to 3, so that there's 2 teachers at all times in those grades, which is, for those of us who have taught the younger grades, really a gift. It means the teacher can teach while the assistant is really helping the younger ones with the this, that, and the other thing. We developed a thing called Middle School Fridays, which is an elective system. And this came out of like, what's working, what's not. And our kids were coming to us and going, we want electives. They do electives over there. And we're like, ooh, okay, how would we do electives? And so it's really beautiful. They have this choice, these menus, and they get, I think it's like 3 or 4 weeks maybe in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade on Fridays, and they get put into groups with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders mixed, and they do things. We've had all kinds of things, rock climbing, they'll do journalism, you know, all the way to having the blacksmith come and teach them how to do blacksmithing, to jewelry making, and all these wonderful things. And it's such a beautiful way for them to mix. We're also really proud about our small group support we offer. On top of, I run Ohana, which is an educational support program. So any child who's, I get to work with the amazingly brilliant, beautiful children who just learn differently. So they might have a tracking issue or whatever. But from first to fourth grade, we make sure those children have that kind of support academically, and I do sensory integration with them as well. And that's really built into our program, on top of doing small group breakout. We don't always keep the class whole. When the children start reading groups in second grade, they break out, and we have these beautiful volunteer people and that are trained to come in. I train them, and then they sit with 4 children and read. And we have small group breakout for math and that kind of thing. So COVID came. COVID came, and that was big for us. We are, as you can see, we feel so strongly about relationship, about, you know, being together. And so that March of last year was really challenging. We decided to just get on our horse though and just rise, and we called it the RISE program. And we had a, what did we call it? It was RISE for Resilient Interim. I can't remember all the things we called it, but it was just like, okay, guys, we're going to do this together, because we had to be online. And we did the very best we could. And we were aware as teachers, painful towards the end, especially, of like, the children are going away. It was really painful. And we did the very best we could. So we spent all summer going, there's got to be a way, there's got to be a way. And we hit a lot of walls. We spent a lot of time, but we hit a lot of walls. And by mid-July, we thought we were not going to be able to open. And we were pretty distraught. And a magic moment happened where we got a new document, and it said, if you can do this, this, and this, and your teachers can be trained as caretaker. I mean, we had to go through all these special trainings. And anyways, they came and looked at our campus. And because of the way our campus is and the size of our classrooms, we were able to meet all the criteria. And teachers went through special training to have the children on campus. We started with 2 hours. It was huge. It still made all the difference to just have them come every day. And then it meant that any connection we had with them on Zoom, it was like the threads were back. So not perfect, but it was a lot. And now we're up to 3 hours a day with the 2 cohorts, and we're striving for 4 hours a day. And just like the rest of the nation and the world, we're not sure what's going to happen, but we take it every day and we just keep going, how can we do better? And what's been amazing is, at first we thought the kids were going to be so not able to do the mass, and you know, especially the younger ones. So we created a yellow brick road that they could have a mass break on. It never gets used. It's not been a big deal. The kids seem so happy to be here. And so we're doing all the things that we think are the most important things, you know, the hands-on, the core of the curriculum, and then putting onto Zoom what we, you know, can work that way. But just because we do see them every day has made a huge difference. And we did, you know, our enrollment dipped a bit, especially in the beginning, and it's now climbing back up. And like I said, we're still financially solvent, so we're very proud about that. Lastly, I'm actually just going to end here with a little piece written by, I wanted to, at the 8th grade graduation, we don't have like a one child, they all speak. And they all give, I'm not going to read the whole speech, but this one piece from one of them, they're all equally as beautiful. I wish you could read them all, but they all take one reflection of something that, you know, about their education, and they all get up and speak to that. And I'm just going to read the last part of this child's piece. When a person passes from this lifetime. He cannot take money or power with him, nor can he take the struggles or hardships. No, when our time comes, all we can wish to leave behind are beautiful memories that will live in the people who remember us. But the biggest gifts are the laughing, the dancing, the singing, or just sitting with each other. This is our gold when we share our essence. I have done the most important things a human can do with others in my class here at Siskiyou School. I've experienced true wealth during my years in Waldorf, and I hear my heartbeat, and it has grown strong in the process. It is the ending and the beginning of a necklace of memories, a necklace that I will always wear across my heart and share with as many people as possible in my journey ahead. I love that. So I'm going to close this and open up to questions that you might have. Laura, you can let me know. Any questions? Nope.
Hi, this is Eden. I'm on the page that says Ryan Ginn.
Hi.
Hi. I don't actually know how to show my face. I could probably do that. Anyway. Oh, start video. Yeah, so our daughter, it looks like she'll be coming into the first grade class. And I'm wondering, how big is the class again? And yeah.
So we usually cap it around 25.
Okay.
Sometimes 26.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay.
26 is like that's kind of, where we go.
Max. Yeah. And you have a couple of helper or assistants in the classroom. So it's kind of like
we have all the way through third grade, and then if a fourth grade's really big, but usually by then the children are, it's like so much about routine and rhythm around here that they're just, it's fine. Yeah.
And the other question is, what have you guys been able to do with the time that you have together?
Yeah.
Does main lesson happen online?
Yeah. So main lesson always happens. So we have the children 5 days a week right now, and we have 2 cohorts of 3 hours each. So they come and they always have main lesson. And then what we've done is they have in their in-person time, they go from main lesson to a specialty class, and they have that specialty class for a week. And then the next week they get their next specialty class. And then they have one of their other specialty teachers on Zoom. So like we send home baskets and things if it's a hands-on thing or whatever they need, and then they're with that teacher on Zoom.
Okay.
So say you're in the morning cohort, you'll have your whole in-person thing, then you go home, and then you have your person, at home on Zoom, and then switch for the others. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's made a day for them. And then because the teacher then has that back and forth each day, we can, do the meat of it here and then go, okay, here's your home project to do or whatever you can do. So they're learning, but, it's actually been such a difference than 100% online.
Yeah.
Huge. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, my goodness. Well, it sounds like we're there. Laura, you could share a little bit about your experience. Laura has a 7th grader and a 4th grader.
Wait, we do have somebody. It looks like Jed.
Who's it?
Is it Jed?
Oh, Jed. Yeah, I see your hand. Jed?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Hey, I'm Lisa and my husband is Judd. And you talked a little bit about how the specialty teachers were more academically focused. I think you mentioned math or something like that in middle school. How does that transition into more academic focus happen, or when does that happen?
Yeah, the specialty teachers, so let me get clear. They still, like, the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, 5th grade through 8th grade, they still have their woodworking, they still have their music, they still have their painting, they have their foreign language, right? But on top of that, now the class teacher's not carrying their math or their like technical language arts. So in a main lesson all the way through 4th grade, the teacher is teaching like 3 to 4 weeks of a language arts block, which is done through the stories and the writing and all that. Then they're teaching a 3 or 4 week block in the math. And then later in the day, so say they're in a math, then they're teaching a little skills language arts, and then it switches. The main lesson's language arts, and they're teaching the math skills, but that's held by the class teacher. Then they get to the upper grades, and on top of everything else, they are having a math teacher who's like, that's their focus, is the middle school math. And they are totally ready because we know exactly where they need to be. And they actually, it's kind of like they hit 6th grade and they get to do that, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, we're now we go to math class. I mean, it makes them feel really good too. And they're ready, they're hungry, ready. And those teachers know exactly where they are and what needs to happen. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess what other topics other than math does it happen?
So it would be the specialty teacher, the specialty teachers, the academic specialty teachers would do the language arts. We have a thing called the English project, and then like literature and math.
Okay.
And then the main lesson teacher is still carrying all the other academics.
Okay.
Does that
Thank
make
you.
sense to you?
Yep. And
Okay.
I do have one other question.
Yeah.
How much time do the kids spend outside?
Quite a bit in a good day. It totally depends on, the day, but like, yeah, you guys haven't been able to visit. We didn't get to do the classroom tours. So like in the morning, even you'll see all the grades. Some are out going for walks. Some are, depending on the age, they're jump roping, they're down at the field, right? All of that. And as teachers, we're always gauging what class did they just come from and where are they going. So say they come out of a math class and I know they're going to games class, then I know they're good to go. But if I know they have, I'm going to be doing one more thing with them, there's usually a big chunk of time there then that gets, for movement. And we also really instill, like, if you need a lap or a walk, or you're allowed to do that kind of thing. That's something that's really built in for, if anybody needs it. But they have the games, all the woodworking is outside. We have a gardening program that's outside. So we try to, like, especially with the younger ones, the older kids, can more easily say what they need, but for the younger ones to go from an academic class to an outside to an academic to an outside. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Allison? Sorry.
Hi, yes, thank you. I just was wondering, I know you kind of spoke about the different like stages from 0 to 7 and then 7 to 14. Could you speak specifically as to like what we can expect in 1st grade to be covered?
Yeah. So 1st grade is like, we call it the bridge year. From the kindergarten experience, also just even in their development, they're just like in this bridge year. So they like right now, the 1st grade is fully in their phonics and they're starting to do their reading, but it's slow beginning, like in that first few months, because what we're really doing is honoring that this young child is coming out of this one experience and also developmentally and coming into like, well, now I'm in a group and now I go to school. And a lot of it is about creating safety and the habit life. The habit life goes a long way for them. Also now all of a sudden they have like 5 different teachers, 6 teachers, you know, so anyways, but they are starting to read. They start their math, you know, all the writing, and we do it not like in a public school where it's just like poof, you know, like that. It's very gentle, and just how do you lay out your page? Where do you put your things? That kind of thing. So it's partially like how do you just be in a group and be in school, and it's very gentle. And it's such a magical year. You really, you know, and then also really knitting the social fabric of that class, which is so important to us. So a lot of work goes into how do we be together? How do we play together? How do you start to speak your needs, you know, and get to know that, you know, how a day goes. So, and they learn their, you know, writing, math, all that. Then they have Chinese, and they have music, and they have, they learn how to knit and all those things. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Okay. Laura, you up?
I'll speak for just a quick second. As Nina mentioned, I have a 7th grader and a 4th grader, and we've been there since they first started. And in any given year, I could say, you know, oh, it's just so, it's lovely, and oh, just, you know, the beauty and everything. And the thing that I would say about this year, because again, we've lived through, you know, we've lived through COVID, we've lived through this pandemic, is that my 7th and 4th graders, I feel like we're almost trained for how to deal with a pandemic and how to deal with this kind of education. They have so much strength. And when it happened, of course, my adult brain was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? How we can't, no, we can't, yes, no. And I was so concerned just how it was going to work. And I remember my 7th grader just being so confident and ready. And he just would, you know, and for our family, it was the first time he was actually on a screen. And so that was one of our things. So COVID brought screens to our family, and it was phenomenal to watch just how well they adapted and that they were able to rise. I mean, I know we use that as our term, but they were able to rise to that, I mean, huge change in their life. And then of course we started in the fall, and it was the same thing. Oh my gosh, how are they going to wear masks? How are they distancing? How all of this? And I work at the school, so I have the privilege of watching it all unfold. And I got to watch this beautiful thing of watching children being so adaptable, and they were just so hungry to be with one another. And I just, you know, then, you know, of course the fires hit, and then all the other things. And so then we come back, and I talk with my kids, and I'm like, how is it? What, and I'm waiting for the big, you know, ball to drop. And they just said, it feels so good. It feels normal. And for a parent to hear that, and even though it's so different in this moment, you know, where we're at in time, to hear them say that it feels so normal was the best gift I could ever receive as a parent. So I just kind of wanted to speak to kind of what the education has brought to our family and to our kids, as I feel like they're so resilient and they have so much strength. That's it.
Yeah, I could piggyback onto that because my son, who's now 25, you know, obviously COVID is, you know, for these younger children, you know, young adults. But they have, he and his Waldorf buddies, they have like really bonded back together through, you know, even Zoom and all of that. And just to like get each other through. And they're like, gosh, we're actually part of history now. Yeah. Anybody else? Allison.
Sorry, I have another question. I'm wondering, will there be an opportunity for parents to tour the campus and see the classrooms in person?
As soon as things are safe, you know, that's a beautiful part of what we always offer, but like we cannot at this point.
Okay.
Everybody has to be, because, you know, there's just all this tracking that goes on right now. Mm-hmm. So we can't even have anybody extra on campus. We have to know exactly who's been exposed to who. I don't know, maybe we'll do a video, Laura, or something, but who knows? Yeah.
We actually are in talks of doing a virtual tour. We're working towards that. But again, even just with working at the school, I can't even go into the classrooms because of how it's all laid out. But that is something that we have thought about. And once the metrics change, we hope to be able to have parents back on campus. We will have parents back on campus one day.
Okay, thank you.
We do have a question from you. I hope I said that right.
Yes. Hi. You is my husband. This is Kim. We're looking into a Siskiyou school for excuse me, our son who would be entering 4th grade next year. And I was just wondering, I guess, what the application process is and enrollment, and are there spots for that grade, and how is that integrated? I guess switching schools.
Mm-hmm. Laura, you want me to answer that?
I'm happy to answer.
What's that?
I was just going to tell her to go onto the website. On our website, you can contact Kristen Beers. Her information is on the contact us page, and she can answer all the enrollment questions.
Yeah, and basically we find out, somebody meets with the parents, we meet with the child. Sometimes the child visits for 3 days, just depending on the situation, but that can happen now. So we are able to have children do the visiting thing. So anyways, Kristen can walk you through that. And yes,
Okay.
room in that class.
All right, great. Thank you.
Yeah. So is that all? We're at about 10 to 8. So I want to thank you all so much for being here. Really nice to share with you. And please, if anything arises for you, you can reach out. If you contact the office, they'll come to me, or try to get your question. It's really good to get your questions answered, up front. And we look forward to seeing there's quite a crew coming in next year. I've got to meet a lot of them, most of them, and they're lovely crew. New first graders. All right, well, we'll say sweet dreams and everybody sleep well, and do your homework about answering those 4 questions. Good stuff. All right, we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.